Okay, I want you to try a little visualization experiment with me. Just imagine you're walking through the absolute center of a massive concrete city. Could be London, could be New York.
Right.
It's the middle of July. The air is thick, it's humid, you can smell the asphalt baking, traffic is just blaring,
Yeah.
and everyone is rushing.
Yeah, I can already feel my shirt sticking to me. It's that, oppressive city summer vibe.
Right, it's sensory overload. And then suddenly, right there in the middle of the sidewalk, blocking your path, you see a massive, pristine white snowball.
Just sitting there.
Just sitting there. It isn't doing anything. It's not an ad. It's just this giant sphere of winter in the middle of a heat wave. And, because it's summer, it is slowly, inevitably dying.
Mm-hmm.
You stop and you watch it turn from this solid, bright white thing into a slushy, translucent form. Water starts pooling at the bottom. It turns into a dark, wet stain on the pavement. And then the sun just dries the pavement and it's gone.
That is such a striking image. It's confusing, it's beautiful, and honestly, it's a little sad. It feels like a glitch in reality.
Well, for anyone familiar with the art world, that isn't just a hypothetical scenario. That is a description of the Snowball series by the British artist Andy Goldsworthy.
Ah, Goldsworthy.
And that is who we are talking about today.
Right, the man who is famous for going out into the wild and making sculptures out of, ice, leaves, stones?
Dregs.
And just letting them fall apart in the middle of nowhere.
That's the guy. But here's the twist for today's deep dive. We aren't just going to talk about what his art looks like. We're going to talk about what his art sounds like.
Which is a fascinating premise because, to state the obvious, he's a visual artist, a sculptor. He doesn't release albums on Spotify. He works with silence.
He does. But we have this incredible source material today, a column by a writer known as Mr. It's titled Andy Goldsworthy and Music. And the whole argument here is that you can't fully understand Goldsworthy just by looking at photos in a book. To really get it, you have to pair his work with specific sonic landscapes.
So the author is basically saying that visual art and music, they share the same DNA.
Exactly. That's our mission today. We're going to explore how 3 specific genres of music, that's ambient, field recording, and minimal music, how they unlock the hidden meaning in Goldsworthy's work. We're talking about time, nature, and the power of silence.
I love this. It sort of turns the whole world into a multimedia experience. It implies that if you look at a leaf closely enough, there's a rhythm to it.
So let's unpack this. The first big theme the source material brings up is time. And honestly, when I look at photos of his work, that's the first thing that hits me, just the sheer patience.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a guy who will wake up at 4 in the morning in freezing conditions in Scotland.
Right.
He'll go out without gloves because he needs to feel the materials. He'll pick up shards of ice and weld them together with nothing but his own body heat and spit to make a complex star shape.
And he does this knowing the sun is coming up in 2 hours to destroy it. That seems, heartbreaking.
It connects to his whole philosophy. Goldsworthy was born in 1956, and his entire career has been a challenge to this Western idea that art has to be permanent. Usually you make a sculpture, you cast it in bronze.
You put it in a museum?
Right, and you expect it to last for 1,000 years? Goldsworthy just says, no. His medium isn't just the ice or the stone. His medium is time itself.
So the melting isn't a failure of the art.
The melting is the art.
The melting is the art.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The process is the point. And this is where Mr., the author, draws the first musical parallel. If Goldsworthy's art is all about gradual process-based change, what does that sound like?
I'm guessing it doesn't sound like a 3-minute pop song with a big chorus.
But definitely not. The parallel here is minimal music.
Okay, I've heard minimalism in design. White walls, empty rooms, but minimal music.
Think of composers like Steve Reich. Are you familiar with him?
The name rings a bell, but I couldn't hum a tune.
Well, you wouldn't really hum it. Music for 18 Musicians is probably his most famous piece. It's hypnotic. But here's why it fits Goldsworthy. Minimal music relies on these repetitive patterns loops that shift very, very slowly over time. It uses this technique called a phase shift.
Phase shift. That sounds like physics. Break that down for me.
Okay. Imagine 2 cars at a red light with their blinkers on. At first, they're blinking at the exact same time. Click, 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 click.
Why?
But one is just microscopically faster than the other.
So eventually they start to drift apart.
Exactly. One blinks while the other's off. They go out of sync. They create this sort of chaotic galloping rhythm for a second. And then, if you wait long enough, they drift back into perfect sync again. That's a phase shift. It's not a story. It's a process of alignment and misalignment.
That makes so much sense with the ice sculpture, because when you watch a snowball melt or you watch leaves turn brown and crumble, it's not an explosion, it's not an action movie.
Yeah.
It's a texture change. It goes from crystalline to slush to water to vapor. It's a loop.
And the column points out that both the art and the music, they rely on this circular sense of time. Goldsworthy actually has books titled simply Time and Stone. And in them, he emphasizes that the work isn't the object, it's the life cycle of the object.
So when you listen to Steve Reich, you're not waiting for the beat to drop. You're just listening to the texture change.
You're listening to the evolution. It demands you slow down your internal clock. You can't consume it in a tick-tock second. You have to sit with it.
It's anti-scroll art.
That's a great way to put it. It forces presence. And that leads us directly to the second pillar of this comparison, which is place.
Goldsworthy is famous for being site-specific, right? He doesn't really work in a studio.
Rarely. He feels the studio disconnects him. He'll go to a river, find stones in that river, and build a sculpture right there. No glue, no reinforcements. He just uses what the land gives him.
The example in notes that blew my mind is Stone River at Stanford. I looked this up. It's incredible. It's this wall of sandstone, but it's not a barrier. It snakes through the landscape.
It looks like a giant golden snake made of rock just moving through the grass.
And the notes say it wasn't just dropped there. The stones were salvaged from buildings destroyed in the 1906 and 1989 earthquakes. So the material itself has a history of destruction and rebirth.
It fits the theme perfectly. And there's the Storm King Wall in New York, which does something similar. It winds through trees, goes down into a pond, and comes out the other side. It doesn't fight the landscape.
It highlights it.
Exactly.
So if Goldsworthy uses the materials of the place, what's the musical equivalent? How do you use the sound of the place?
Well, I'm curious what you think. If you had to capture a place in sound, how would you do it?
I guess I just record it, like take my phone out and record the wind.
You're on the right track. This is where field recording comes in. But true field recording is a bit more than just a voice memo. The artists mentioned in the source, like Chris Watson or Gianna Winderin, they treat the microphone like a camera lens.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Watson is a legend. He was actually a founding member of the band Cabaret Voltaire. Very experimental stuff, before he became a sound recordist for David Attenborough documentaries.
Oh, wow. So he knows how to construct a scene. He's not just pressing a record and walking away.
Exactly. When he releases an album like Weather Report, he isn't just documenting wind. He's framing the sound of wind whipping through dry grass in Kenya, or ice cracking deep inside a glacier. He uses special microphones to hear things our ears can't even pick up.
Yeah.
He's rearranging sonic reality to highlight its beauty, just like Goldsworthy rearranges stones.
I like that, framing reality, but there's a darker side to the section in the source material, isn't there? It talks about fragility.
It does, and this is where the comparison gets really poignant. We talked about the snowball melting. Goldsworthy's pieces are often destroyed by wind, rain, gravity. They're designed to fail.
The source calls this the fade out.
Right. In music, that's like the decay of a sound, the way a note hangs in the air and then just dissipates. But the source points to a specific masterpiece here, William Basinski's The Disintegration Loops.
I was reading about this. The backstory is, well,
it's heavy. It's essential listening for this topic, but yes, it's heavy. For anyone who doesn't know, Basinski was a composer in New York. In 2001, he was trying to digitize these old loop tapes of easy listening music from the 80s. Just simple pastoral melodies. But the tapes were old. They were physically degrading.
So as he played them to record them, the tape was actually falling apart.
Literally flaking off. The magnetic dust that holds the sound was stripping away from the plastic. So you hear this beautiful, lush melody. But with every repetition of the loop, gaps start to appear.
It gets crackly.
It gets crackly. Then the melody starts to drop out. Silence takes over. The music just drowns in static. And the context is crucial. He finished this right around September 11, 2001. He actually filmed the smoke from the towers from his roof in Brooklyn while listening to these tapes of music dying.
That gives me chills. It's the sound of something beautiful just vanishing forever.
And the source argues this is the perfect sonic counterpart to a Goldsworthy sculpture melting. It's beauty in the face of inevitable annihilation. It's that feeling of holding on to something while it slips through your fingers.
It's sad, but is it, I don't know, is it meant to be depressing?
I don't think so. I think it's meant to create a heightened sense of awareness. You pay attention to the music because you know it won't last. Just like you stare at the ice sculpture because you know it'll be water in an hour.
It values the moment because the moment is fleeting.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third intersection. Cycles, silence, and what the Japanese call ma.
Ma, that's a negative space.
Negative space, or maybe the space between.
I have a visual for this one from the notes. Rowan leaves and whole. This is probably his most iconic image. He takes these bright red leaves, almost neon, and arranges them in a perfect circle floating on black water. But the center isn't red.
It's a black, empty hole.
And it looks like a portal, like a drop into an abyss.
That hole is the key. The circle highlights the seasons, the great loop of nature. But the hole, it represents the unknown, or the silence everything comes from. To match this, the source suggests ambient music, specifically the drone.
When you say drone, I think of a refrigerator hum, an air conditioner.
It can be close to that.
Yeah.
But think of Brian Eno. He's the godfather of this. Ambient 1, music for airports.
Which was actually designed for an airport, right?
It was. Eno wanted to make music that could be ignorable as well as interesting. It doesn't demand your attention. It just creates an atmosphere. It exists within the environment, just like the sculpture exists within the forest.
So it's about the silence around the notes.
Exactly. John Cage is the big influence here. He argued silence is just as important as sound. In Goldsworthy's piece, that black hole in the middle, the nothingness, is what makes the red leaves pop. In ambient music, the space between the notes is what lets your mind wander.
It invites you in. It's not yelling at you.
It invites a dialogue. You aren't just a consumer, you're a participant.
Okay, so to recap, before we get to the really fun part, we have minimal music for the passage of time, the loop, field recording for the connection to place, the framing,
Right.
and ambient for the cycles, and silence, the negative space.
It really is a complete ecosystem of sound and sight.
And what I love about the source material is that it doesn't just leave this as high-minded theory. The author, Mr. The Mies, actually curates a soundtrack for us.
I love a good playlist.
They break down exactly what we should be listening to, depending on the time of day and the season, to get that full Goldsworthy experience. So I want to run through this. I want to live my life like an Andy Goldsworthy sculpture for a day.
Let's do it. Walk me through your day.
Okay, it's morning. Sun is just coming up. The world's waking up. What's on the speakers?
For morning, the key word is freshness. You want that crisp, cold air feeling. The source suggests pairing Chris Watson's Morning at the River, so you get literal water sounds, birds waking up, with Steve Reich's music for 18 musicians.
That Reich track has a pulse to it.
It does. It pulses like a heart rate increasing. It feels like a city waking up or sap starting to flow. It's very optimistic, very rhythmic.
Okay, so we've had coffee. We're moving into the afternoon. The sun is high. I need to get things done.
Now we need flow. The source recommends shifting to Philip Glass, specifically the album Glassworks.
Glassworks is faster, right? It's got those rapid-fire arpeggios.
It's relentless but beautiful. It captures the energy of the day without being chaotic. It feels like water moving through that stone river wall, just forward motion. It's productivity music, but natural.
But then the light starts to fade. Evening, golden hour.
Time for reflection. The playlist pivots to Harold Budd and Brian Eno, The Pearl. Or, if you want something more grounded, Hildegard Westerkamp's Kit's Beach Soundwalk.
Oh, I've heard that one. It's fascinating because she narrates it, right?
She does. She talks about the tiny sounds of barnacles and the shift of the waves. It forces you to stop thinking about your emails and start listening to the small stuff.
And finally, night falls. Darkness. The visual world disappears.
This is the time for disintegration. This is where we play Biosphere's substrata, or, like we discussed, the disintegration loops.
Substrata. That's a dark ambient record.
It's very atmospheric. It has samples of wind, dialogue from Twin Peaks, icy sounds. It feels like being alone on a mountain at night.
That is a heavy way to end the day, but appropriate if we're following the Goldsworthy cycle, returning to the void.
It's deeply meditative.
Yeah.
It prepares you for the cycle to start all over again.
The source also zooms out to the seasons, which I think is a lovely touch. If I'm looking out my window right now, let's say it's spring, things are budding.
Spring is Ryuichi Sakamoto's Async. It's textured, a little irregular. It sounds like things sprouting from the earth. Unpredictable and new.
Summer.
Back to Chris Watson. Weather report. Full immersion in the heat, the flies, the density of life.
Autumn, when the leaves are turning that Goldsworthy red.
Johann Johansson's Orpheus. It has this melancholy beauty to it. Cello, strings. It feels like a goodbye. It captures that feeling of the year winding down.
And finally, winter.
Alva Noto and Ryuichi Sakamoto have a collaboration called Vreon. It mixes piano with electronic glitch.
Glitch. Like a digital error.
Yeah, tiny clicks and cuts. It sounds like ice cracking. It sounds like stark, white, cold precision.
I can actually hear that crispness just thinking about it. You know, going through this list, I realized something. I usually listen to music to distract myself, to block out the world.
We all do. It's a shield.
But this is the opposite. This is music to help you connect to the world.
That is the crucial insight. The conclusion of the column sums this up perfectly with this concept of one-timeness.
One-timeness, meaning uniqueness.
Yes, the idea that this specific moment, the way the light is hitting that tree, the sound of that car passing, it will never happen exactly like this again.
Goldsworthy captures that because the sculpture will be gone tomorrow.
Exactly. And the music we've talked about.
Yeah.
It tries to honor that same fleeting nature. It tells you, listen now, because this is it.
So by combining them, we create this cross-sensory dialogue. We stop just looking or just listening, and we start, what? Witnessing.
The source puts it this way. It shifts you from listening to music to feeling the presence of sound. Just like standing before a Goldsworthy sculpture allows you to feel the presence of the stone. You're not looking at an object. You're feeling a presence.
That's a really powerful distinction. It's the difference between seeing a picture of a river on Instagram and actually standing knee-deep in the water.
Exactly. And in a world that's increasingly fast and increasingly permanent, where everything is recorded and stored forever in the cloud, there's something incredibly rebellious about art and music that embraces disappearing.
It's a rebellion of slowness.
A rebellion of slowness and a celebration of the temporary.
You know, we've traveled quite a distance in this deep dive. We started with a snowball melting in a hot city, walked through stone walls at Stanford, and listened to tape falling apart in real time.
It's been a journey through texture and time. And I think the relevance of this today, it can't be overstated. We're constantly bombarded with information. This toolkit, this combination of visual philosophy and a musical palette, is a way to reclaim our attention.
It's a toolkit for noticing the micro changes. It's reminding us that even if we're sitting in an office, nature is still happening, the light is changing, the dust is settling.
And we're part of that loop. We aren't outside of it looking in.
So here's where we usually leave you with a thought, but today I want to leave you with a challenge, inspired directly by our source material.
I like challenges.
I want you, right now, wherever you're listening to this, to look out the nearest window. Or if you're outside, stop walking for a second and look around. Don't just glance. Look. Observe the movement of the world. Is it chaotic? Is it still? Is it decaying? Growing?
And once you have framed that image in your mind, ask yourself, if you had to assign a genre to this specific moment, minimal, ambient, or field recording, what would it be?
And are you listening closely enough to hear the silence?
That's the real question.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Go find your soundtrack.
See you next time.